Welcome everybody. This is a Grab the Mic webinar from the Beam Exchange, and today we're very lucky to have two speakers from the RECONOMY program who are going to be talking about their experiences and insights into applying the MSD approach to environment and climate change issues. And the speakers today are Anastasia Bekish, who is an environment and climate change manager for RECONOMY and has a whole host of experience with managing projects, but also with civil society development and in the field of climate policy. And then Zenebe, who is a very experienced development economist for HELVETAS, and he is the program manager for RECONOMY. So as I said a moment ago, this webinar today is going to be about applying an environment and climate change lens to an MSD program. And it's going to be looking at the insights from that have already been gathered by RECONOMY. And I'll start by handing over. Well, let me just, in case anyone missed it, we're going to be using the Q&A box for questions to the speakers. So if you have questions for either of these two fine people, please put them in the Q&A box. But also, please use the chat box just to say anything you like, comments, to introduce yourself, to throw in any kind of information that you want to add to this discussion. We'll be drawing on that as well. But like I say, 20 minutes, half an hour of presentation from Anastasia and Zenebe, and then we'll be going to Q&A for your formal questions. Great. So let me start by handing over to the speakers to share their experiences.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's great to be here. Maybe we move to the next slide, Anastasia. You are controlling the presentation. Yes, as you can see on the slide, we have structured our talk in such a way that first we will say a few words about the RECONOMY program, followed by some slides about a practical example of how RECONOMY has been applying the environment and climate change lanes using the MSD market systems development approach. We will particularly focus on the energy efficiency pilot in the construction sector, covering 3 countries in the Eastern Partnership region. That's Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Then my colleague Anastasia will tell us about how RECONOMY has been applying the climate resilient development kind of lanes, and then how we have been really aligning the program towards that. Before we open the space for questions, as Mike is now writing, we will conclude by providing key lessons and a few practical recommendations for practitioners and then projects. So without further ado, let me just briefly, thank you, Anastasia, talk about the RECONOMY program. So RECONOMY is an inclusive and green economic development program of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, implemented by HELVETAS Swiss Intercooperation in the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkan regions, as you can see, the 12 countries that the program covers. The goal of the program is to support women and youth, including the most disadvantaged and excluded, to benefit from economic opportunities by generating income and decent and green jobs, which by itself is also a big topic in terms of how to measure, for example, decent jobs, green skills, and then green financing. So, but by having a look at the 12 countries, you may wonder, how we are operating in these vast swathes of countries. The program operates in a very quiet, dynamic and then complex context, including fragility and war, as you all know, I mean, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the political instability in Belarus, but also the instability in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The program started its inception phase in July 2020, as you all remember, which was also at the height of the COVID pandemic. And it was very difficult for us, to also move around and then engage, partners and facilitate the program. Therefore, I think it's fair to say that we have been really baptized by fire in terms of, walking the talk of, adaptive management. And then to be honest, we also found, some opportunities from the crisis and fragility. For example, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia gave us, I think it led to this energy crisis, but also the momentum towards, the green transition. We also are tapping into, migration and development, engaging, programmers from Ukraine, but also to facilitate the reintegration of the countries from the region towards Western Europe. That also requires trade standardization, skills standardization. So the long inception phase that started in July 2020 is ending this month, December 2022. And the main phase for the Eastern Partnership will start in January 2023, and for the Western Balkans in April 2023. So I could go on and then explain this very complex and big program, but let me stop here, and later we will also put some links about the program and some of our works. I have also my colleagues there putting these links. Now let me move just to the pilot. Anastasia, if you move to the next slide. So the pilot intervention of energy efficiency in the construction sector actually focuses on the three countries of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. It's a short pilot that has been running from June 2021 to December 2022 for testing, some of our ideas of bringing, the double dividend, that is the environment and economic value addition, which RECONOMY will potentially scale up during the main phase. So basically, thank you. Basically, the pilot focuses on three underlying kind of dimensions. The first dimension is the environmental rationale, which is driven by the contributions of energy efficiency and renewable energy as one instrument for strengthening climate resilience. For example, solar power, as the three countries of Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan have considerable potential in renewable energy and energy efficiency, even though this potential has been really underutilized at the current stage. The second angle is the regionality angle, the regionality rationale. Environment and climate change doesn't know borders, so it affects all countries. So the regional argument of RECONOMY, which makes it also unique program, is it focuses on identifying common problems and common opportunities, shared problems and common opportunities. And we also engage partners, actors that could anchor these common and shared problems and opportunities across the different countries to benefit all countries. But we also say that people do not live in a region, people live in countries. So we go back to the different countries and look at the different systems, whether, for example, the environment and economic value addition may work, the regulatory aspect may work. How about the skills system? So we look at these different areas by going into the different systems of a country. The inclusion rationale is justified by the fact that it is highly relevant and it offers opportunities for the target groups, mainly youth, with different levels of education. But we can also argue that the greater adoption of renewable energy sources, including solar, brings significant potential for women's economic empowerment, and then it can lead to positive change in their economic status and then access to the labor market, which is by the way acknowledged by some of the strategies of the countries, such as the National Sustainable Energy Action Plan for Georgia. So what I'm trying to say is that based on these three angles, what we did was to further investigate, yes, this slide, how and then why the construction sector has been underperforming despite the opportunities that I have just mentioned. So what we did was we looked at, the relevance. There, it's very clear that the acceleration in the global and regional energy transition contributes to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and mitigation of the effects of climate change. Second, there has also been considerable, energy potential in the region, even though there is still, a significant dependence on imports of fossil fuel. Thirdly, as I mentioned earlier, also there are more opportunities in terms of absorbing, the workforce by creating, opportunities across the value chain of energy efficiency in the construction sector. So based on, the understanding the relevance and the focus of these pilots, what we did next was to kind of probe how this sector has been really underperforming. So we found out, a number of symptoms ranging from a lack of, better understanding of services by private sector enterprises in the energy efficiency sector, to how the different countries in the region also face, skills shortages and then deficiencies, as well as how the regulatory frameworks tend to kind of disable innovation and adoption of renewable energy solutions by private sector enterprises. We did not stop there. So we went from the symptoms to understanding, root causes or key constraints. So what we found out was, first, the application of a one-size-fits-all approach to service provision makes, the services really less relevant and less diverse to different businesses of different size and capacities. So that was one of the key constraints. The second constraint was the low quality of education and training and skill mismatch that has prevented really women and young people from obtaining and retaining good jobs and then starting their own economic initiatives. And then the third one was the fact that private sector enterprises and their associations could not influence the regulatory framework, which in turn, could not address the stifling enabling environment for the private sector to invest and to be involved in the sector. So if we move to the next slide. So we looked at, the regulatory framework, the skills development aspect, and the business and technological services. Among these, RECONOMY decided to start with the skills function for a couple of purposes, not to intervene in the regulatory frameworks, not to intervene in the business and technology services, but to start with the skills development part. If we move to the next slide, Anastasia. There are three reasons why we did this. The first reason is businesses in the energy efficiency sector in construction, such as Knauf and then Rehau. These are big private sector enterprises in the region, but also globally, have strong business models which did not require RECONOMY to intervene. Secondly, the regulatory framework, despite its infancy and an early stage, and then despite the fact that it requires a little bit of wider enforcement, has been relatively supportive and encouraging. However, what we found out was a major gap in the skills function, which RECONOMY found critical for bringing the three areas together. That is skills development, regulatory frameworks, and then also the business and technology services. So the role of RECONOMY then is, as I briefly mentioned, the case of energy efficiency construction is regional. It affects all countries. What we did was, if you move to the next slide, Anastasia. Yes, what we did was in the different countries now we intervened, in Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia by using, our implementing partners. So RECONOMY uses implementing partners, to reach out. So in this case, we have the Energy Efficiency Center, Georgia, EECG, that really facilitated, bringing the educational and training institutions and private sector enterprises to support, the designing and then provision of these trainings. Just to provide an example, in Georgia, the linkage and training provisions were between VET College and REHAU, one of the private sector enterprises. In Azerbaijan, it was between Baku University and KNAUF, which is the other private sector enterprise. In Armenia, it was between Rubinar LCC and another facilitator called Ferti. So based on these different interventions, we are observing that the pilot is really providing important insights and early results in terms of key areas. Let me just mention three of these. The first one is the emergence of common standards across different countries. This is highly important because if people like the youth want to move from one country to another, this provides opportunities to use their skills. The skills will be recognized, the skills will be standardized. So it's very, very important. So most of the time we also talk about that, young people are leaving their countries and migrating to Western Europe, but there is a lot of, migration within the region. So young people move from one country to the other. So in that case, I think the skills standardization and its recognition will be very important. Secondly, the skills are also not only just recognized in the region, but also globally. These are certified. Therefore, even if young people leave the region, they will be better off. We're not saying that we are romanticizing migration, but I think people will be prepared if they would like to move to other countries. And the third reason is the actors present in all countries where RECONOMY operates are enabling us also to facilitate these common challenges, common opportunities across the different countries, and hence contributing to the regional value addition of RECONOMY. So just let me summarize by saying that the pilots really demonstrated the regional value addition of RECONOMY in three ways. The first one is the issue of energy efficiency in construction is a common as well as shared problem across countries, which I have mentioned. There is also a momentum to push this agenda due to the acceleration of the green transition, the European Union recognition of the benefits of green transition, which is not an option, but imperative. The crisis from COVID to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, these are creating really good momentum. Second, RECONOMY has also been able to identify and then engage actors like large private sector enterprises and then other facilitators to anchor these common and shared problems. This also fits nicely into the approach of RECONOMY towards the double dividend, that is the environmental and then economic value addition. Third, the different target groups live in different countries and not in the region, which is a social construct. When we say a region, it's a social construct, and hence RECONOMY has been able to analyze the role of national and local systems, as well as the need of the target groups at the different levels. So this pilot is really proving the regional value addition, but also bringing the double dividend between economic and then environmental rationale. So let me stop here and then hand over, the opportunity to Anastasia to tell us how the program has been trying to align, with the climate resilient development pathways. Anastasia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Zenebe. So my role in RECONOMY is focused on shaping the program's approach towards making the environmental integration real and also influencing our decision at all stages of the program design and in implementation. So I will zoom out in my part of the presentation and will guide you briefly through our approach and explain its impact on RECONOMY and also our lessons and challenges we have been facing. So, as Zenebe has already explained, their climate resilience development is the center of our approach. So we are aligning ourselves with this philosophy, and we are committed to contributing to accelerated green transition, meaning they're mitigating our impact on climate and supporting the economies in the region in their decarbonization efforts, but also their adaptation and risk reduction capacity. So in this case, if we are following this approach, we have to understand the nature of the enabling factors and the conditions accelerating this green transition. But we also need to think about the nature of the various climate-related risks, which may significantly inform us about their shifts in the natural ecosystems, but also in the social economic systems, and offer reasonable solutions and the basis for decision making. So knowing the risks allow us to know the costs of climate change and environmental degradation, and to forecast the dynamics in the market systems and identify also the incentives of the market actors and push them to take the action. And while many of you, I'm pretty much sure, are familiar with the concept of the physical climate risks and other environmental risks, because they're quite widely covered by various methodologies, I would like to use my time to talk a bit more about the transition-related risks and trends. And transition here is the word associated with the green transition as the socio-economic process, and their impact on their value chains and all the processes happening in the systems. So the green transition risks are associated with the shifts which are happening at the level of policies and regulations, technologies and access to finance, but also the attitudes and behaviors happening in societies. And these risks and trends, the processes are strongly linked to the globalized nature of our economies, and they can be transmitted through the various channels, like international trade and regional development integration processes. And in RECONOMY specific case, since we are operating in the Eastern Europe, we are considering very seriously the effects of the European Green Deal externalization to the neighboring countries. So in the case of the pilot project mentioned by Zenebe, the energy efficiency project, we observed very serious shifts in the national regulations, which are closely linked to the EU integration processes of the Eastern Partnership countries, but also to their national level obligations in terms of the energy community and their incentives to build a better energy security. At the same time, what we observed is that the labor market was really unprepared to address these issues. In other economy sectors we are dealing with, we are more targeting their trade area. For example, we have the textile or fashion industry sector. And here we are more talking about their ability of the exporting companies based in our region to remain part of the international supply chains and to be part still of the exporting opportunities to the European market in the situation of the strict conditions and standards related to the sustainability and environmental concerns. So when it comes to their enablers framework, we have already discussed that the risks and trends lens should be used for better understanding of what is happening in the systems and how the climate crisis and environmental degradation, but also the green transition will be influencing the systems, the barriers, and enablers lens answer the different question of what and how. And the framework of the barriers and enablers condition, which can play the different role, is quite familiar to you, to many of you perhaps. So there is nothing really special here in terms of defining these areas of where we should address the gaps. But in the case of green transition, of course, there are a lot of specific approaches and specific gaps in the awareness of the different market actors, like private businesses, which may not feel capacitated or which may have the lack of the knowledge in terms of building their modern and greener business models, the general population, but also the state institutions which are responsible for multi-level governance and responsible for aligning the policies and regulations with the Paris Agreement and other commitments and processes related to this transition. So in our understanding, we were taking this enablers and barriers lens as the second stage to actually identify in which areas we can intervene to make it comprehensive, to make it really meaningful. So to summarize briefly, first, understanding of the complexity of the impacts and on their socioeconomic systems is really crucial. So that's where we've been starting from. Then second, based on the specifics of the context of the sectors or the cross-cutting systems, it is really crucial to understand what kind of approach and the objectives you're taking. So we can either support their decarbonization processes or the mitigation or the adaptation processes. And this may require further different tools and the specific knowledge and integration of different actors. So perhaps it's quite clear for everyone that environmental integration requires careful consideration of all these lenses at all stages of project design and implementation, and also a very strong capacity of staff. And in order to translate this vision and commitment into practice, we developed our environment and climate change integration procedure in RECONOMY. And as you can see from this general overview, it really has a lot of stages and steps where we're addressing the different stages of the program. And sorry for this, a lot of this text, but I will guide you through this procedure. So in general, it is based on the SEDA Green Toolbox, and we are aligning ourselves with their requirements and key directions for mainstreaming environment and climate change, but they're quite general. So in our practice, we used the elements of other tools like CEDRIC of SDC and also USAID Climate Risk Management Toolbox, and designed our own internal checklists for the sector selection, diagnosis of the market systems, and also assessment of the capacity of our partners. And as it's clear, perhaps from the previous parts of the presentation, in this case, we were really looking forward into the integrating the transition perspective and the related risks and trends. So this area was not covered that much by all these tools. So we really had to be creative and to design something what could be applicable to the MSD project of this nature and what could serve our decision-making and understanding. So we were also having some challenges and gaps in our knowledge. And for example, this can be very much related to the area which was already mentioned by Zenebe when he started his presentation. And it's about setting the greening indicators. So here we experienced quite some challenges related to the variety of possible approaches in defining and then measuring the green jobs and skills, for example. But all this process for us is a really continuous learning process. So we are very much open and continuously looking for better solutions, allowing us to make it also clear for our partners that we are very serious to have this perspective in our projects. So let me jump into the conclusions, because actually we are running out of time for our presentation. The conclusions are divided into two parts: for donor organizations and for the practitioners. And for donors, perhaps their main challenge and the problem is the mainstreaming fatigue related to climate change. The climate crisis is unfortunately treated as the part of the very long list of different transversal topics. So when we are talking about their significance, the seriousness of the environmental integration, this might not be the case in all the communication between the donors and the implementers. So as we see, their key answer is the building capacity and awareness, both at the level of the staff of donor agencies and the implementers, but also at the practical level. As we mentioned, there are quite a lot of gaps which can be addressed and actually support the implementers in their succeeding in integrating the environment and climate change in their strategies and operations. And so these gaps can be addressed by adding their ECC, or environment and climate change add-on, to the MSD operational guide, and developing the frameworks for assessing and integrating the transition risks and trends, which is missing currently in the absolute majority of the existing guidelines, and also creating the unified approaches to measuring the green indicators, because currently from our practice and knowledge, most of these recommendations stay at the policy level, at the country level, and doesn't really go into translate to the level we are dealing with. And for the practitioners, so start early. This is the key lesson, and their environmental lens should be integrated in your way of thinking from the stage when you only at this in the process of ideation your project and writing the project proposal, so that at the later stage it will be much easier to integrate it in other stages. And for us, it was the very clear lesson that environment and climate change and the green transition should be taken as an overarching context, because the green transition is the overarching context. It's the major, very significant transformation process touching basically all areas of our life, all the sectors of economy in all the countries. And in order to do it, we really need to concentrate not only on the physical impacts of climate change, but also on the socioeconomic shifts, and focus not only at the country level, because as it was explained earlier, many trends, many risks, many processes can be noticed, identified only when you zoom out to the regional level, and then you can see what are the requirements, what is coming, and the markets where the countries export to, or the national level because of the regional cooperation processes. And last but not least, our own capacity. So having the environment and climate change experts in the next door department may help you to some extent, but actually this is everyone's job. So of course, in the development aid world, we are not the superheroes, we're just humans after all. And all of us are experiencing perhaps the same psychological barriers in accepting the scale of climate change and the urgency of the action. So it might be difficult for us to align ourselves and actually commit to the significant level to integrate an environment and climate change to our work. But if we are committed, seriously committed to the sustainable results of our work, that's what is unavoidable. The environmental lens should be there. Otherwise, in the perspective of 15, 20 years, we will be still alive to observe in person how our bright achievements in the economic development might be washed away by the consequences of climate change. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and looking forward to discussing with you.
Great. Thank you very much, Anastasia and Zenebe. Very interesting. Wow, lots of questions, in my mind at least, and a few are coming now in the Q&A box, so please do put them there. I want to throw the first question. As a first question to you, is just pick up on a question that Carsten Schultz submitted in advance. But maybe, Carsten, if you're there, I can give you the mic and you can pose it yourself. But you'd need to let me know if that's okay. I think I'll just go ahead and speak on your behalf since I haven't heard back from you. Carsten asked a very simple question in a way. He said, what is specifically different about RECONOMY compared with other MSD programs? And maybe, Zenebe, you could address this, because I had the same question in my mind when I was looking at that slide of the 3 different country programs that you mentioned. And I thought, how is this different?
Usually, I think, when we say a regional program, it's we have that's this multi-country focus. That's not regional for us. I think what is regional is what I have been mentioning repeatedly, that we focus on common problems and shared problems. That's the first entry point that affect all countries. So that's the first entry point. The second entry point is finding also partners, private sector enterprises, or other facilitators to anchor these common problems, shared problems, and opportunities to facilitate these across different countries. So when we engage partners, we look at not only their understanding about MSD, but the ability to anchor, to be institutionally fit to facilitate these common problems, and then leverage common opportunities. And the third one is, as I mentioned, when we say a region in the Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership, it's a social construct. We don't have entities, political, economic entities that could bring these countries together. So people do not live in a region, but people live in a country. So we have to go back to the different countries and understanding the different systems, whether these common challenges and common opportunities can be facilitated, because the target groups are also there, women and young people. So when we started RECONOMY, we were looking around blueprints, just to leverage for us to understand what a regional program looks like. It never existed. What we saw was multi-country programs. So I think this is one of the, so to speak, a new kind of contribution to understanding, the regionality of MSD initiatives. Secondly, I mean, the MSD approach has not been also applied, focusing on the regionality concept and this practice, So RECONOMY is the first of its kind, to facilitate that. And thirdly, for us to know also what works, what doesn't work, we need to change, the culture of knowledge management and learning. I think everybody agrees with me that when we do have, time in the different projects, we write, we disseminate, we share our lessons, right? When we don't have time, we just don't do that. But in RECONOMY, we are changing the culture of knowledge management and learning in order to know what works, what doesn't work, by making knowledge management and learning communication as part and parcel of what we do. It's at the heart of the theory of change. So I can go on and then add, other features, other characteristics that make, RECONOMY, if not, significantly different from other initiatives, but I think slightly different from other initiatives. Let me stop there.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I understand, that's very interesting. I mean, the regional dimension, but I think what we're really interested in particularly is the environment climate change difference. And I saw there's a couple of questions that really try and push in on that. So let me throw out a question which came from Gun. Gun, by the way, I did offer to give you the mic so you could ask this question yourself, but you haven't replied yet. So I don't know whether that means you haven't seen my message, but let me just put in your own words what you said. You said, how are explicitly economic objectives, i.e., employment and income, how are they explicitly balanced with environmental and climate change concerns? What does this lens imply when there's a trade-off between, say, economic and environmental goals? or different priorities? How does that work in RECONOMY as opposed to a different kind of MSD program?
Anastasia, would you like to take that?
Go ahead, I will maybe add something.
Okay, I think, good, that's a very good question. For us, you know, the green transition is not an option, but it's imperative, you know. So in RECONOMY, I think I briefly mentioned also in my presentation that what we are focusing is not either or, but it's a double dividend. It's the environment and economic value addition. And how do we do that? So we use sector selections as entry points, not to make, you know, RECONOMY a sector-focused program, in order to understand, you know, to what extent the environment and economic value additions are there, you know. For example, in agriculture and tourism, which are also sectors that we are working on, what is relevant is the adaptation part, you know. That means resilience in the two sectors. But if you go to sectors like energy efficiency in the construction sector or circular economy in textile and apparel, we do have, you know, these mitigation or decarbonization, if you like. But for sectors which may not have, you know, both very well articulated, then we follow the do no harm principle. So this is how we try to facilitate in terms of, you know, contributing to the environment and economic value addition. I think the momentum also that I mentioned, both coming from the European Union in the region, but also the crisis that we see, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also the inflation now. I mean, I think you might have heard this new term called greenflation, you know, which is really, I mean, becoming a problem for us by increasing, you know, the price of, you know, for example, solar panel and then others. These are also really, you know, pushing, you know, consumers to change their behavior in terms of adopting, you know, some of the elements of green transition. So Anastasia, if you would like to add.
May I add a few words just why I was talking that much about the risks topic, especially the transition risks. Their scale of risks associated to the climate crisis is so significant, and it's being translated into the very clear economic and financial consequences, both at the microeconomy level, but they later come into the macroeconomy level. So when we're talking about the trade-offs, for us, actually, this is not like the trade-off. In the case we're not working and not focusing on aligning their development strategies of this region to their climate change and the green transition, in the perspective, and not even in the perspective of nowadays, the vulnerable groups and the economies in general will suffer. So the costs of climate change is much higher. And if we intervene at the later stage, they will be doubled, tripled. So actually, it's much better to work on this now and also to create the opportunities for the vulnerable groups related to the green transition than to postpone it, think about it later, talking about the trade-offs. And especially for the opportunities, the green transition creates a lot of opportunities. So it's about their access to the new market. It's about the access to new professions, and it's about their better gender inclusion, for example, because it's quite well known, I guess, that the green transition opens up the opportunities for women and other disadvantaged groups, what is not the case in the traditional economies.
Thank you. On a sort of related question, I think there was a question from Niklaus Waldvogel, who is I'm going to let him put it in his own words, actually, about what drives the focus.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. This is Niklaus Waldvogel from Swiss Contact. Thank you, Zenebe and Anastasia, for this amazing introduction. the RECONOMY program and also the green skills aspect. I have a question related to the main driving force behind green skills activities. According to your experience, what is the main driving force? Is it this policy level pressure that we all know is massive? I mean, you've mentioned the EU green skills and green transitions agenda. Or do you also experience a really strong market demand for green skills? And maybe as a side question, for me, green skills is not only technical skills, but it also includes a lot of transferable or soft skills. And I'm particularly interested to understand the demand for those skills, like a young person having developed transferable or soft green skills. Is this person really more attractive for employers or not?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. It's a really interesting area. So I would say that from our experience, we're seeing both the top-down policy pressure. Indeed, absolutely, this creates a lot of the shifts on the markets in all these countries and all the variety of the sectors we are dealing with. So we do not take it like from the negative perspective. For us, it plays in alignment with our strategy. So yes, it creates a lot of their demand among the private companies for the skilled people. So basically in their region, Zenebe was talking about South Caucasus, the private companies are really lacking their skilled professionals to work with the renewable energy, to work with their energy efficiency area. So yeah, this pressure creates a demand, but from the other side as well, you know that we are all dealing with their energy crisis, and the energy crisis influences a lot the competitiveness of the production in the region. So people are getting interested, and people are also dealing with the energy poverty, especially in the Western Balkans. So for me, it comes from the both sides. But regarding your second question, yes, we are using there quite a broad definition of the green skills and exactly what you've been talking about. So we are not concentrating only on the technical skills, but for us it's very important to consider also the other types. And for the soft skills, for the operational skills, that's what we are dealing with in other sectors, like in the fashion industry, for example, where people really need to have the skill of using the sustainability of the marketing advantage as the competitive advantage. They need to know how to get the benefit out of this area. So yeah, for us, all the variety of the green skills are really important, and it's crucial to consider all these changes in the labor market.
Yeah, maybe just to add, a few points on that, if you allow me, Mike. Just to summarize it, I think there are three kind of driving forces. The first one is changing behavior and perceptions, not only by young people, but also consumers in general. I think the energy crisis is a very good example that is really forcing people to think about the way they construct, the way they consume also. The second one is, I think private sector enterprises are also seeing the benefit. So to speak, this triple bottom kind of issue is there, people, planet, and profit. And the third one is, as you mentioned, Nick, the regulatory frameworks that are really overarching and hence stimulating change, not only for consumers but also private sector enterprises to accelerate the transition to green economic development.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very useful. There's a question here. I want to give the microphone to Jennifer Zenebe. Sorry, I don't know your surname. From MEDA. Jennifer, you were going to ask us about mainstreaming fatigue.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Very clearly.
Great. Thanks, Mike. It's Zenebe. You did really well. Thanks with that. I love the concept of mainstreaming fatigue. I mean, I don't love the concept, but I love the term. I'd never heard it before. I'm a gender equality and social inclusion specialist, so I'm all too familiar with this, but didn't really have a name for it. So my question for you is,
Oh no, we've lost you, Jennifer.
Lost.
Oh no, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back now.
Oh, sorry. It would be great if you could share some strategies that you found for overcoming mainstream fatigue, whether they were successful or unsuccessful. They could be great learning. Thanks so much.
Okay. So regarding the mainstreaming fatigue, I was talking specifically about the donor institutions, but this is very much applicable, of course, to their implementing organizations. Yeah, we are just taking normally the long list of the topics, but for me, it's very much obvious that in regards to the environmental mainstreaming fatigue, first, we need to build the urgency, the understanding of the urgency of the climate crisis. We need to prioritize. Second, we need to build the capacity of the staff, because what we see from the communication in the region, it's really difficult for the people to deal with something what is not part of their direct work. So it typically happens like when you submit the project proposal, you attach your environmental impact assessment, and that's it. And then it's really difficult to follow up with the donors, but also with our own staff, how it was further translated. So it should be the priority based on the capacity. People need to be educated how to work practically with this topic. They need to have the tools, they need to have the time frame and timeline, so do it regularly, and they need to have their sustainable communicative processes. And then this perspective, this lens should be also integrated into the very concrete objectives and indicators. So if it's not measured, it's not reported, then nobody takes this into the account. So this is for me, that's what I can say in the brainstorming mode, but maybe Zenebe can add on.
Jennifer, I mean, part of the problem is also the issue of greenwashing. I think it's a huge topic that requires a lot of time to discuss. Not only greenwashing but also impact washing. You have this SDG washing. Now coming into the light. So when we are not getting really the double dividend, that is both environmental and then economic value addition, then donors are not really seeing the need to push. So there is a little bit of hesitance. I think when we started RECONOMY, actually we had to have a lot of back and forth discussion with our CEDA colleagues. Can we have the trade-off? Gun was asking, can we prioritize the economic part a little bit? Push down the environmental aspect. But our argument was that no, I think it is not an option. It is imperative, but walking the talk is where the problem starts. How do you measure? How do you put indicators? How do you report back? Return on investment for the donors, but also I think the downward accountability that we have with our target groups. So that's where I think this fatigue also emerges, because we are standing on a very thin ice of generating evidence.
I'm before I look at one of the other questions, I was thinking about looking at Edouard. Actually, we've only got 4 minutes left, but I just wanted, before we just get onto Edouard's question, which is about measurement, I just wanted to just check, sort of push back a little bit on this. So this is from me personally. Okay, I thought it was really interesting, your slide where you talk about climate risks and also these policy transition risks. I thought that was one, for me, the most useful slide that you presented, because I think, as you said, Anastasia, these transition risks that policy related are often not on people's agendas, and I think that's really fascinating, and I'd like to sort of hear more about that. But to go back to a question I posed to you earlier when we were rehearsing this webinar, if you look at the region that you're working with, what is the contribution of that region to global climate? What is its carbon footprint, if you like, and how significant is that? as a share of in the global footprint for climate change that's being created? And why should countries that are low income or middle income take on an apparently unreasonable share of responsibility for global carbon production, when countries like the UK, for example, are just about to fire up their coal-powered fire stations today to cover our temporary problem with a bit of a cold snap?
Maybe, Mike, I mean, you heard about these loss and damage debates, I mean, I don't want to go into that, but I think that's precisely all about it, But Anastasia, maybe you can build on what.
Okay, Mike, your question is so much contradicting the nature of the Paris Agreement itself. So when we started the negotiations on climate change, and when the convention was started in 1992, yes, it was based on this principle of common but differentiated responsibility, meaning that countries which are less contributing to climate change are less responsible, sort of, but should be more supported. But, given that we are that much not on track with our goals towards limiting the rise of the temperature, this is not the case anymore, that some countries can decarbonize their economies and some shouldn't. So the nature of the Paris Agreement and the nature of their national contributions, obligations of all the countries we are covering is based on the fact that each and every country should. So otherwise we'll just not make it, and we'll just run out of the limits, all the limits possible. So currently, as many of you may know, we are on the way to +3 or even 4 degrees rise of the temperature, while the goal of the Paris Agreement is 1.5, maximum 2. So in this case, I guess it's not their good discussion that some countries may wait and refrain from the actions. Secondly, of course, the countries in our region are very diverse, they're very different, but all of them are lagging behind their commitment to decarbonize their economy. They are very much energy inefficient, they are very much dependent on the fossil fuels. And in this case, it's not only even about climate change, it's about their energy security, economic security, and at the end about peace in Europe. Yes. So reducing this dependency to fossil fuels actually brings a lot of dividends, no matter what you may think about the climate agenda.
Okay.
I can speak about this topic for a very long period of time, but just to come back one more time to our argument that actually decarbonization, the green transition, brings a lot of benefits. So these countries, with modernizing their economies, they are also introducing new technologies, they are becoming more resource efficient, and at the end, it's a plus for everyone, a win-win situation.
Well, it's great, and I think it's worth making that point again and again, actually, Anastasia. So thank you for doing that. That's a very articulate answer to my provocative question. I'm afraid we have run out of time, but I'm just going to allow us to run over. So if you have to leave now, many thanks for joining us, and please do let us know what you thought about the webinar by filling in the very quick survey that will be posted in the chat right now by my colleague Isabel. Just 2 minutes, or not even that, 30 seconds to let us know what you thought about this webinar would be fantastic. Otherwise, if you can hang on for a couple of minutes, I'm just going to ask one last question, which came in from Edward. Sorry, Edward, I don't know which organization you're with, but he asked about the fact that you touched on the human side of youth and women inclusion particularly in this pilot program. And he's worrying about what perspectives there are for measuring the benefits or the impact for those particular kinds of results. So he'd be interested basically to understand the approach for measuring climate change mitigation and the human benefits or impacts that are being achieved by the work.
Yeah, before we select actually sectors, we speak to the target groups. because we would like to understand whether these sectors are relevant to them, whether these sectors also generate opportunities, or whether it's also feasible for them to participate. We don't want to force people to commit, because there are resources there by programs like RECONOMY. Once we understand that, the next question is, as I presented in the pilots, why they are not being benefited. That's where I think we were looking around, to understand the root causes. And we brought, private sector enterprises who do also have the incentives and to some extent the capacities, to be involved. So the measurement part is where, we are still struggling, because it also relates to defining, what we mean by green skills and green jobs. So we looked at, the ILO definition, but also the UN and then other organizations like IIED, the International Institute for Environment and Development. So what we found out was we used, two approaches. The first one is we use skills to define, the jobs. What kind of skills? I think in our response to Nicola's question, we talked about, these are primary, low level skills for maintenance, for installation, but also we have what we call these extended and high level skills in designing, in consulting, and then also marketing. This is the first. The second kind of definition is if a sector has, deeper kind of focus on environment, like energy efficiency in construction or the circular economy in textile and apparel, then by definition, it's green, So jobs that we are creating, income that we are creating will be defined as green. These are, the kind of, two approaches that we are using, which we go back, where we started analyzing and selecting the sectors to see whether there is a correlation between our selection and facilitation and then the benefits that are flowing down to the target groups. That's women and young people.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Zenebe, for that final answer. We have run out of time. Thank you for staying around for so many who have.